I'd like you to meet my colleague. This is Africa. Africa, come here, up here, come on, come on. There you are. This is Africa. Africa is 7.5 from Guide Dogs for the Blind. We are announcing today the formation of an exploratory committee to have Africa run for president because we believe that her nose-to-the-ground politics will enhance anything that Washington is doing. Since Washington's not doing anything, Africa has to be an improvement. So why am I here? Well, I have some questions. Stacy, are you still around? Oh, good. Okay, have a couple questions for you. How many people here are salespeople? Okay, a bunch of people. How many are not? Oh. How many of you who say you're salespeople think you're great salespeople? Okay, great salespeople, and the rest of you as well. Here's my last question. How many of you think it's a great idea that when a blind lecturer asks you a question, the best thing you can do is raise your hand? And you who raised your hand, you're fired. And that is really the point of what we're going to talk about today. The fact is, if you are a salesperson of any kind of worthwhile note, you will always try to customize what you do, and you will always try to make your operations fit the needs of what your clients really have, not necessarily what they think they have, but you are going to be flexible, or ought to be flexible enough to meet the conditions that come up in your day-to-day operations. Namely, you're not going to present to me, if you're trying to sell me, the same way you're going to sell to Stacy. PowerPoint presentations don't do a lot for me, I got to tell you. Now, I have given plenty of PowerPoint presentations. Let me explain a little bit about my background. And then I've got another set of questions for you, and we'll see if you remember what I just told you. I have been in sales since 1978. Actually, I've been in sales my whole life, but from a professional standpoint, since 1978. I have been in selling, I've been in sales management, I've worked for a variety of companies. I've worked for Xerox, I've worked for Quantum Corporation, the manufacturer of tape backup systems. I've worked for every kind of company in between. Resellers, as well as manufacturers. And so I've seen a lot of the things that all of you talked about today and heard about today, and I've faced the challenges that you have faced. I've also had to be very much involved in fixing some of the kind of challenges that I've seen in organizations, exactly the same kinds of things that you see and that you're experiencing. And there's one thing that I have learned, and it's the most important thing I think that I can share with you. The fact of the matter is that you have control over certain things in your lives, and there are things that you don't have control over. It won't do you any good to worry about the things over which you have no control. You've got to figure out what you have the ability and the opportunity to address and deal with that, because the rest will either take care of itself, or it will go away, or it's really not something that's worth your while and time to fret over. Okay, having said that, let me try to deal with the perspective of what that's all about. I have a question for you. So I want you to imagine a billiard ball. You know what a billiard ball is. Everybody plays pool or has or whatever. And now I want you to imagine the planet Earth. Okay, here's my question. I want you to know this is not a trick question. There is absolutely one answer to this question. It is the obvious answer. It is the absolute, no trick, honest truth that there is only the one obvious answer to this question. Imagine the billiard ball and imagine the planet Earth. Which one is more round? Okay, how many say the planet Earth? And if you raise your hands, you haven't learned a thing yet, so I hope you're not. How many say the planet Earth? All right, we got a couple. All right, geez, but you failed because you raised your hands, right? Oh, you didn't. Okay, good. How many say the billiard ball? Okay, great. All right, can you prove it? Okay. By the way, I have a master's degree from the University of California at Irvine. My master's is in physics, go anteaters, and so I can prove it. Let me explain. A billiard ball is 2.25 inches in diameter, plus or minus 5/1000ths of an inch. If you do the math, what that really means is that a billiard ball is round to a degree of 1 in 125. 1 in 225. 1 something in 225. Now, let's look at the planet Earth. Planet Earth is roughly, we're going to say for the sake of discussion, 8,000 miles in diameter. Yeah, some people are going to argue and say it's spherical, somewhat and not totally round, but come on. It is 8,000 miles in diameter, has mountains that go 6 miles up, and has trenches that go 7 miles down into the Pacific Ocean. What that means is that the planet Earth has a diameter of 8,000 miles with a variance of 13 miles, which, if you do the math, means that the planet Earth is round to a degree of 1 in 615, almost 3 times as round as the billiard ball. That is mathematically and absolutely correct. Most people, however, say the billiard ball. Why? Because it looks more round. You go by what you see and not by what is really there in front of you. And my job today is to get you to think in a different perspective, perhaps, than what you usually do. I said that I've been in sales a long time, and I believe that I've been in sales actually longer than my professional life, because as a blind person, I've had to sell to convince people to let me take my guide dog on airplanes before we had the Air Carrier Access Act, take my dog on buses and trains and other public transportation or into hotels long before we had the ADA. And I've had to sell to convince people to hire me as a blind person, no matter what my resume said, no matter what my track record was. I've had major challenges to convince people to just give me the opportunity to try to be as successful as they are. There is a perception that if you are blind, you really can't do things that sighted people can do. That perception exists to the extent that the unemployment rate among employable blind people in this country is over 70%. And that's just because of misconceptions and poor attitudes. The reality is that blind people are as capable as anyone else, given the proper training and given the proper opportunities, just like anyone else. We end up having to try to sell a lot more just to convince people to give us some of those opportunities, which, by the way, is a reason to hire blind people as salespeople, because we tend to be very dedicated. We know what we're doing because we've had to do it just to get where we are. A lot more than you guys have. But be that as it may, what I'm getting at is that as a blind person and as a professional in the world of sales, I understand a lot of the challenges that you face, that I face, that we all face in our market today. The reality is, some of the things that we've had to do to be successful at sales has changed a little bit. Salespeople are needing to be more entrepreneurial than we used to be. While it's great to have all sorts of systems in place, all kinds of backroom resources to help us, the reality, no, I won't even say the reality, but the truth is that we still have to take responsibility for making the sale happen. If we are the people assigned to, appointed to, or volunteer to work with specific accounts, we take on the responsibilities of making the sales. Everything else is secondary. I have a question, another question, and anyone can speak up and answer. What do you guys sell?
Oh my gosh, really? That quiet?
Come on, somebody. What do you sell?
AT&T. Service.
AT&T. Service. What else?
Telecommunications.
Telecommunications. What else? That is the one and only thing you sell, yourselves. Nothing matters more than selling yourself to your customer. When I hired people working for Quantum and other companies, I'd ask the same question, and I got all sorts of answers. There's one guy that I hired who I always regarded as the smartest salesperson I ever met, and he answered the same way. Basically, he said, the only thing I have to sell is myself, my reputation, and my commitment, and my respect that I gain with my customers. And that comes from keeping my word. Everything else is secondary. I don't care who you are, what you sell. First and foremost, you sell you, and everything else becomes a lot easier. Mark was talking before about Verizon winning some of the CalNet 3 awards, or was it CalNet 2, with the proposal that they had that looked really great and so on. I submit that the more you sell yourself, the more you get people to believe and trust in you, the more success you will have no matter what you do. Now, you do have to come through with other parts of it, but still, the more people trust you, the more everything else will fall into place. When I worked for Quantum Corporation, I was the Mid-Atlantic Region Sales Manager, which meant I was the Mid-Atlantic Region Sales Manager for a Fortune 500 company. 17% of our sales went through the New York City area where I sold. And there were times that I and some of my sales guys, and I'm going to think of my friend Kevin, the smart one I mentioned, I remember times that we would go to a customer and they would outline requirements to us. Now, our products did specific things. There were things that they did not do. We could have fudged it and it would kind of work, but it really wouldn't work. And we were very much prone to say, here is what we can do, but here is what we cannot do. Our bosses, of course, wanted those sales no matter what the product did and didn't do. But what I learned early on in working in my sales career was that if I were truly honest with my customers, the fact is many times they would come back to me without consulting anyone else simply because I told them the truth and they knew that they could trust in my assessment and my responses. And that's all I really have to offer any customer. The other side of that is that we also got a lot more business as a result because the customers knew what we had and the customers knew what our products could do. And many times they would come to us and they say, we already know that your product will do this. We're not going to do any kind of review. Give us a quote. Now, that may be a lot harder to do in the state world. Of course it is, because everything goes out to bid and so on. But still, people get real creative when they have someone they really want to work with. And it doesn't always necessarily go exactly as we would like, but the odds are much more in your favor if people truly trust you. And listening to what I heard this morning about AT&T, about all the strengths of AT&T, if you can bring that home, and bring that home about yourself and the kind of company that you represent, and you feel it in your bones, and you work with your customers to get them to understand the importance of all of that, you will do a lot better than you could ever imagine at being a successful person in the world of sales. And for some of you, that's probably not magic, but we get so bound up in so many things, it's time to bring the perspective back to what really matters. And ultimately, what matters is you. And you making people realize that you have a better story to tell, if you want to put it that way, better products if you want to put it that way, but ultimately that you are the one that is really able to be there and come through for them when the chips are down, much less when things are going really well. There are a lot of changes that go on in our lives. Some of them we just don't have control over. Some of them we do. But even in the ones where we don't, as I said before, we do have control over how we deal with them. And let me prove my point. I think that's probably in large part why Stacy asked me to come. Some of you have heard this, a few of you perhaps, but probably most of you haven't. I said I worked in New York City as the Mid-Atlantic Region Sales Manager for Quantum Corporation. I was hired by Quantum in 1999 to come in and be the person to open up a direct sales channel for them in the tri-state area around New York. I had been working for a reseller at the time as the Eastern Region Sales Manager. I like working for manufacturers better, and when Quantum came along with this offer, it seemed like a really good thing to do. About that same time, I went and got my 5th guide dog, Roselle, a yellow lab, something like Africa. When I was asked what I wanted in a guide dog, I said I wanted a dog with an on-off switch. And what I meant by that was I wanted a dog that when it was time to work, he or she would work and stay completely focused on the job. And when it was time to play, the dog would play with the best of them. A guide dog's job is not to know where I want to go or how to get there. The dog's job is to make sure that I walk safely and that I walk in a straight line until I give the dog a command. It's up to me to know where I want to go and how I want to get there. So Africa doesn't know how to get me to the restroom out the door and down to the right. I have to know how to do that. And I now know how to do that because I've been there once. That's all it takes. We opened an office for Quantum in the World Trade Center. I had been traveling around the World Trade Center for 3 years, selling for other companies. But as the leader of our office, it was my job to be able to do whatever I needed to help enhance the team. When I hired salespeople, including my friend Kevin, one of the things I always said to them was that as your boss, I'm a second person on your team. Let's figure out how I can best help you. And I have lots of stories about that, and we just don't have enough time to go into them. Like going to Solomon Brothers and me doing a PowerPoint presentation and having a lot of fun doing that because I go in the room and nobody believes a blind guy's going to do the PowerPoint presentation. But there's a lot to the story. And the neat thing about a blind person doing a PowerPoint presentation is I don't have to turn and look at the screen. Works out really well. And people would come up afterward and they yell at me and they said, you know, we didn't even dare fall asleep. We forgot you were blind. You never looked away. I said, yeah, well, even if you had fallen asleep, it doesn't matter. The dog was taking notes anyway. We would have got you. But the fact is that I was able to do that and be pretty successful at doing those presentations. And again, just don't have time to go into it in a lot of detail. But suffice it to say that Kevin figured out that having me come and do presentations was a great thing, and it attracted a lot of notice from customers, especially when I could also talk very technically. I learned a lot about the technical aspects of our products. I was a sales guy. I didn't have a degree in engineering. I had a degree in physics, but I learned all the technical aspects of our products. So I, in fact, became a de facto extra sales engineer. That meant I could talk to the technical people and answer their questions. And a lot of times that freed up engineers to go do other things. But I did that because I felt I could add value to the rest of the sales force by being able to go with them as their manager and someone who could talk to people at all levels of the organization, including the techies. And you know what? It made a big difference in the success of a lot of people. I always viewed myself as a second person on their teams. So anyway, I also knew that as the manager, I had to be responsible for everyone. So I learned all the things that a body had to do in order to function around the World Trade Center. It's sort of superfluous to say I could get around blindfolded, but I was able to walk around the World Trade Center, know where anything was. You couldn't get me lost in the World Trade Center or anywhere around most all of New York City, because I knew it was my obligation to know how to do that, so that if guests came to our office, for example, I could then say, if it was lunchtime, let's go down and have lunch at the deli, and lead the way. How would it look if I had to grab somebody's elbow and say, I don't know how to get there, I'm going to have someone lead me, especially if 2 hours later we were going to be trying to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts? Wouldn't work. I had to know. I had to do it. So why do I say that? You can see it coming. On September 11th, 2001, we were going to be holding 4 sales seminars for some of our resellers who worked through one of our distribution partners. A few people had arrived at 8:45 in the morning when the terrorists attacked the building. I was in my office preparing to conduct the first of these seminars. A colleague from our corporate office, David Frank, was in the office with me. He had flown in the night before. He had responsibility for the distribution side. I had responsibility for working directly with the resellers. And so we were both going to be doing the seminars. And yeah, I was going to be doing the PowerPoint stuff, and we had the projector all set up. We had breakfast for the people and so on. And then at 8:45, a plane hit the building. What happened was, if you imagine my hand as the building, is it kind of shuddered, and then the building began to tip. And it just kept tipping and tipping and tipping. We actually moved about 20 feet. Now, buildings that are tall are supposed to do that. They're actually big springs. We didn't know that. I learned what to do in the case of an emergency and all about the whole fire process and evacuation process. No one told us that the building was a big spring. I should have thought about it because I've been in the World Trade Center when the wind would buffet it around, and so it made sense that it was flexible, but nobody really told us that it could move 20 feet. But it did. As it moved, even though this obviously wasn't an earthquake, I moved over and stood in the doorway. Yeah, that was really going to do a lot of good if the building fell over from 78 floors up. But that's what I did anyway. David, my colleague, was holding on to my desk. Roselle was asleep under my desk. We tipped so far that David and I said goodbye to each other because we thought we were about to take a 78-floor plunge to the street. But then the building stopped, and it began moving back the other way. Slowly, and I remember letting out my breath as it began to move back, and it became obvious that we weren't going to fall. Then it finally got to be in a vertical position again, so I went back into my office, and I met Roselle coming out from under my desk. I took her leash, I told her to heel, which meant to come around on my left side and sit, just like Africa did. And about that time, the building dropped straight down about 6 feet. Today, we know that that was because the expansion joints, or the spring, was going back to its normal configuration. But at the time, we didn't know that. We didn't know what had happened. I was on the south side of the building on the 78th floor. The airplane hit on the north side of the tower, about the 96th floor. None of us knew what had happened, at least where we were. So the building dropped. Then David released his hold on my desk, turned and looked out the window, and started shouting, "Oh my God, Mike, there's fire and smoke and millions of pieces of burning paper falling outside our window. There's fire and smoke above us. We got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here." And I said, "Slow down, David." "No, we got to get out of here right now. We can't stay here." And I said, just slow down. We'll get out. No, we can't stay here." Our guests began to scream. They started moving from our conference room where they were eating breakfast to our lobby. And I kept saying, "Slow down, David." David kept saying, "No, we got to get out of here right now." And then he used the big card. "You don't understand. You can't see it." Excuse me, I could hear the papers falling outside the window. I had David telling me he saw fire and smoke. The building had tipped and come back and then dropped. Yeah, something was going on and we had to get out of here. But there was a difference between David's observations and what David was seeing, I should say, and my observations. The difference was, I knew that we were not in imminent danger, and that no matter what David was seeing, and I believed everything that he saw, I had a piece of information that David didn't. Namely, I had a dog sitting next to me, wagging her tail, yawning, wondering what the heck woke her up, not giving me any indication that she experienced or was experiencing any fear or concern. You've all probably read stories about animals that got their people out of buildings because the buildings were on fire and the animals sensed it and they needed to get their people out. Roselle wasn't doing that. I'd been using guide dogs since 1964. Here it was 2001. So 37 years I'd been working with dogs. I have some understanding of animal behavior. Roselle wasn't giving me any indication that we needed to panic. I finally got David to focus and said, get our guests to the stairs, start them down, don't let them take elevators since you saw fire. I will be ready when you get back and we'll leave. David got our guests and took them out the door and sent them toward and took them to the stairs. Meanwhile, I called my wife Karen, who was at our home in Westfield, New Jersey. The story hadn't hit the media yet, so I was able to tell her about it and say, just keep an eye out for whatever's going on TV. We don't know what's happening, but we're leaving. I hung up the phone. David came back. We swept the offices and we went to the stairs and we started down. As we were going down the stairs, I began smelling an odor, and it smelled familiar. I'd done a lot of traveling for Quantum and other companies. I had basically around 100,000 miles a year in travel. I finally realized after a few floors, I'm smelling the fumes from burning jet fuel. I realized that we must have been hit by an airplane. And I observed to other people, I'm smelling burning jet fuel, and they said, yeah, you're right. We must have been hit by an airplane. But we didn't know any more than that. We assumed that a plane hit us and that's what was causing all the issue. We got to about the 10th floor and we got down about 10 floors and there were some voices above us shouting, move out of the way, please let us through, we have a burn victim here. So we moved to the side of the stairs. They were wide enough that we could move to the side and people could pass us. And a group of people surrounding a woman who was walking and ambulatory, but as David described it, in shock. They passed us on the stairs going down. She was probably burned by fuel vapor droplets that just ignited due to a spark or spontaneously. There was a lot of that up around the elevators because the fuel got into the elevators and evaporated as it fell, and then it burst into flames as it came out of doors. Some little spark or something ignited it. We went down a couple more floors, and again, burn victim coming through, move to the side of the stairs, and we did. After the second person passed us, a woman near us on the stairs suddenly stopped and said, I can't go on, I can't breathe, I can't do this, we're not going to make it out of here. About 8 or 9 of us surrounded her on the stairs and literally had a group hug right there on the stairs and said, come on, you can do it. Roselle gave her kisses, I encouraged her, other people encouraged her, and she was able to keep going down the stairs. We went down a few more floors, and then my friend David suddenly stopped and said, Mike, we're going to die. We're not going to make it out of here. And I just said, stop it, David. If Roselle and I can go down these stairs, so can you. I have a secondary teaching credential, and one of the things that they don't tell you unless you go through learning how to become a teacher is how to use the voice. So I just deliberately snapped at David because I needed to snap him out of his funk. And he told me later that doing that actually made him focus again. Then David did one of the most interesting, innovative, and I think incredible things that I saw on 9/11. He left walking next to me and went on down the stairs about a floor and said, I'm going to stay a floor ahead of you and I'll shout up anything that I see on the stairs. Why is that so incredible? The reason to me it's so amazing is because he was doing that for me and I really appreciated that. But more important, he gave anyone who could hear his voice a beacon. Someone to listen to. Something on which to focus. He kept a lot of people calm and focused as we went down the stairs, I'm sure. I'm at the 48th floor, everything's going okay here. Everything's clear, going on down the stairs, and I followed on with Roselle, a floor above. I got to 48. Hey, I'm at 47, Mike, everything is clear, going on down. Went on down the stairs. Got down to the 45th floor. David shouted, I'm on 44. Hey, the Port Authority cafeteria is here, not stopping, going on down the stairs. Went on down. Got to about the 40th floor, and people were getting pretty quiet. We had all been talking, just kind of speculating and just kind of helping each other. I think that people were starting to get a little bit more introspective or whatever, but they stopped talking. And I went, I don't like this because if people aren't interacting, they're worrying about things they don't need to. So I decided I had to address the issue. Besides that, I had a fear. And I needed to deal with my fear. It's the one thing that bothered me as we went down the stairs. That is, we had power and lighting, and what was going to happen if we lost it all? I knew that I would then be on the stuck with thousands of people functionally blind who couldn't find their way out of a paper bag. Because there are no windows on the stairs in the World Trade Center. It would have been totally dark. So I shouted, "Hey, anyone who can hear me, my name is Mike. I am blind. I've got my guide dog, Roselle, here, and I don't want anyone to worry. We're offering a half-price special to get you out today only." People have asked me since, would you have really charged people? And I just sort of smile, you know. Hey, I'm a sales guy. What can I tell you? I'll take your credit cards. You won't get them back, but I'll take them. But, you know, the fact is that I wanted some people to remember that if we did lose power and lighting, and those would be the people that I could use and count on to help me get other people focused. You know, when airline people are doing those briefings on the airplanes, look around. You will note that they're watching all the passengers, especially to see who is monitoring them and watching them do the briefing, because those are the passengers who will focus in an emergency and help the flight crew. Little secret. So we kept going down the stairs. Finally, David said, "Hey, I'm at the 30th floor. I see firefighters coming up the stairs. Everybody move to the side. Let them by." I went on down to where David was, and I said, "Well, what are you seeing?" He said, "Well, they're not quite here yet, but I can see them. They're all dressed in their heavy protective clothing, and they got a lot of stuff on their back. They might have like 100 pounds of stuff on their backs." Well, they had like 40 or 50, but, you know, who knew? The first guy got to us, and he stopped right in front of me, and he goes, "Hey, buddy, you okay?" You know, that's how they talk back then in New York, you know. Bada bing, bada boom. I never watched The Sopranos, but... Anyway, he said, "Hey, buddy, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm good, no problem." He said, "Oh, that's really nice. We're going to send somebody down the stairs with you to make sure you get out." Witcha? That's another New York word, witcha. Yo, witcha. W-I-T-Y-A. Most of us spell it W-I-T-H space Y-O-U, but, you know, they do witcha. So I said, "Look, you don't need to do that. We're okay." And he said, "Yeah, well, that's nice, but we're going to send somebody with you anyway." And I really didn't want help, because I didn't need somebody kind of dragging me up and down the stairs, especially when you can't get lost going up and down stairs. And I got the dog. We're fine. People don't understand that we'll ask if we want help. You can ask me if I want help, but accept the answer if I say no, because I probably know what I'm talking about. And I have David, if nothing else, who was a floor ahead of me anyway under most circumstances, even if that were an issue. But that's what the dog is all about. Anyway, I said all that to the guy, and he said, "Oh, that's nice, but we're going to send somebody with you." And I said, "Look, I got my guide dog here," and he reaches down and starts petting the dog. And I felt it wasn't the time to give him a lecture about don't pet a working guide dog in harness. And by the way, don't pet Africa. When she's in harness, hands off. She is working. The harness is the signal that says to her, "I'm supposed to be working." And as much as she would love the attention, she doesn't get any. The only exception is when we go through airport security, the TSA people search her, and she loves it. But otherwise, please don't pet her when she's in harness. Now, when we're done here, I will take the harness off and everybody can visit. It's going to cost you, but I will tell you that in a minute. So anyway, he still said he was going to send somebody with me, so I finally used my big card. I said, "Look, I got my friend David over here who can see we're really okay. Don't worry about us." And he turned to David and he goes, "You're with him?" David goes, "Yeah, leave him alone, he's good." So the guy said, "Okay, all right, we're going to go on up the stairs then. You take it easy going down those stairs," he says to me. I said, "No problem." He gave Roselle a few more pets. Roselle gave him some kisses, and then he walked up the stairs, probably having received the last unconditional love he ever got in his life. David reassumed his position, and we went on down the stairs, and finally we got to the first floor. Along the way, it was getting pretty warm just from all the press of bodies. Somebody opened a water vending machine and started passing up bottles of water, and we gave Roselle some water, and we had some. We made our hands into cups and did our best to drink some water, and then we went on down the stairs. And finally David got to the first floor. I was on the second floor because he was being a scout again, and he said, "Hey, the water sprinklers are on. You're going to have to run through the sprinklers to get out of the stairwell." The sprinklers were on because they were creating a curtain across the exit to the stairwell. If fire got into the stairs and the air current drafts brought it down, it wouldn't be able to get into the lobby. Likewise, if the lobby caught on fire, it wouldn't get into the stairs because of the water. David was gone. After telling me that, I got to the bottom, heard this torrential downpour of water, took Roselle's harness and said forward, then hop up, which is a command to speed up and go faster and pay attention. We ran through this torrential downpour of water, finding ourselves on the other side in the lobby of Tower 1. Normally a very quiet place. Now people were just shouting, go here, go over this way, no, don't go there. And they were directing people as to where they wanted them to go. We were taken charge of by somebody who said they were with the FBI. They got us out of the lobby into the central part of the World Trade Center. We ran through the whole shopping area, which is what the first floor of the World Trade Center central concourse was, as a shopping mall. Finally, going up an escalator and getting outside, and as I checked my watch, at 9:45 in the morning. We were told to leave the complex, but we stopped for a second. David looked around and said, Mike, I see fire in Tower 2. What? There's fire in the second tower. We didn't know. We didn't feel the impact. We had no clue. I tried to call Karen, my wife, couldn't get through. The circuits were busy because people were saying goodbye to their loved ones higher up in the towers, I'm sure. We exited the World Trade Center complex, walked over to Broadway, then started walking north on Broadway. We were on the left or west side of the street. We finally got to Fulton Street, crossed Fulton Street, got to the next street, which was Maiden Lane on one side and Ann Street on the other. It's the street that went down to the New York Stock Exchange. We stopped because David said, I can see the fire really clearly now. We were diagonally across from Tower 2. And he wanted to take pictures. I tried to call my wife again. I couldn't get through. I had just put my phone away. David was putting his camera away when suddenly a police officer yelled, get out of here, it's coming down now. All of a sudden we heard this rumble that turned into this deafening roar and everybody ran. Again, we were 100 yards away from this 400 plus yard tall building that was coming down. David ran. I turned Roselle around bodily and started running back the way I came toward Fulton Street, now going south on Broadway. A building was right to my right-hand side. I could hear that there was a little bit of an overhang above us, so I hugged the side of the building as much as I could because I could hear debris raining down around us. I got hit in the ear with a couple of small pieces of concrete, but we kept running. We got to Fulton Street, turned right on Fulton Street to try to get something between us and that building that was coming down. Of course, if it had tipped to the side, then I wouldn't be here telling you the story. But it did exactly what the architects and builders designed it to do. It dropped straight down. We didn't know that at the time. I was running west on Fulton Street and suddenly caught up to David. David had stopped, realizing that he had left me and he was going to come back and find me, but I found him first. He apologized and was just saying, I'm sorry. I said, David, don't worry about it. Let's keep going. The building's coming down. So we kept running, and suddenly we got engulfed in the dust cloud, all the dirt and debris and the fine particles of the breakup of Tower 2. David said it was so thick he couldn't see his hand 6 inches in front of his nose. I can tell you that it was so thick that I could feel the dirt and junk and debris going down my throat with every breath I took, and it was settling in my lungs. We were drowning in this, and we knew we had to get out of it, so I kept telling Roselle, right, with hand signals. I don't know if she could hear me. I don't know if she could see my hand signals because of the dust. I was listening for an opening because I can hear those things as we're moving along. And we were running. We were going at a pretty good clip. We normally don't do a lot of running, but we did that day. Suddenly I heard an opening, and obviously Roselle saw my hand signals or just understood that's what we needed to do. She turned right. She took one step, and then she stopped. She wouldn't move. I knew that she was focused. She wasn't acting afraid, so I realized that if she stopped, there had to be a reason. Kind of stuck a hand out along the wall and reached a foot out, discovered that we were at the top of a flight of stairs. She had done her job perfectly. She did exactly what she was supposed to do. She stopped at the stairs. We went down. We found ourselves in the lobby arcade of the Fulton Street subway station. We were there a couple of minutes, and then a gentleman named Lou, an employee of the subway system, found several of us there and took us down to an employee locker room. And we stayed there until a police officer came and said, you need to leave the area now. The air is clearer up above. And we went back up, and there was still a lot of dust, but it was clearer. So we continued to walk west on Fulton Street. We got several blocks further, and suddenly we heard the sound again, and it sounded like what we had heard when Tower 2 collapsed. I describe it as kind of a sound that's a combination of a freight train and a waterfall. You could hear the metal clattering and the glass clinking and then the white noise of the building collapsing. We knew it was Tower 1 coming down. We thought we were far enough away that we wouldn't be hit by debris, but David did look and see another dust cloud coming, so we moved to the side as far as we could, hunkered down, and waited for everything to calm or the air and the dust to pass. And when it got quiet, we stood up again, and David looked around and said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no World Trade Center anymore." And I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "All I see are fingers of fire hundreds of feet tall and pillars of smoke. The towers are gone." We stood there for a minute, and then I tried to call my wife Karen again, and this time I got through. And after tears on both sides of the phone, she's the one who told us how 2 terrorist controlled aircraft had crashed into the towers, 1 into the Pentagon, and a 4th was still missing over Pennsylvania. We got home later that night and then started to try to figure things out. The media heard about us, and then people started calling me and saying, "Would you come and talk to us about your story and talk to us about the lessons of 9/11?" And the school where I got Roselle, Guide Dogs for the Blind over here in Santa Fe, called and said, "Would you come and be our national spokesperson?" Well, even prior to 9/11, we wanted to move back to California. And here I have people calling me and saying, "Would you come and talk to us and we'll pay you?" A sales guy who's just being called and asked to talk and get paid for talking? It doesn't get better than that, does it? And so I accepted, and we moved back to California in 2002. But what are the lessons? The biggest and most important ones. You're going to face change. You may not control it, but you can control your attitudes and how you deal with change. Don't worry about the fact that there's the change that you can't control. It's not going to do you any good. Another lesson, be prepared for change. Be prepared to be flexible. Figure out how to be flexible in what you do. Learn to be observant about what goes on around you. Learn to do more than just sell. Maybe get more technical. Maybe get better at PowerPoint. Maybe a little bit of both. By the way, I've created my own PowerPoint presentations. Fortunately, I had my wife to make them look good, but I could put the content in, and then we could work together to get the best presentation. Sounds like with Stephanie over here, you've got that. AT&T has so many resources. One of the most important things that you can do is to figure out how to use them. Figure out how to work the system and make sure that you stay true to your customers. And that's as good as it gets. I want to leave you with something. I wrote a book that was published in 2011 called Thunderdog, the story of a blind man, a guide dog, and the triumph of trust. It was published on August 2nd, 2011, and on the 10th of August, we got a call from the publisher, Thomas Nelson, telling us that it was already on the New York Times bestseller list. And it has been a #1 New York Times bestseller. And if you want to pet Africa, I would invite you to come back and buy a book. We have them back there. The print copies are, well, basically it's $20. If you pay with a credit card, it's going to come out a little bit less, but I just came down so fast we didn't get a chance to get change. We have audio books, and they're also $20. But mostly we have print books. Every book is autographed. And I would really appreciate you guys buying books because I don't want to take them home. And Africa has told me to tell you that she really needs kibble tonight, so we need you to buy books. But what I will also do is take Africa's harness off. So anyone who wants to come back and visit, she loves to visit. But I would appreciate it if you buy a book as well. But I want to leave you with something. This is called Guide Dog Wisdom, Lessons I Learned from Roselle on 9/11. And it goes like this. Number 1, there's a time to work and a time to play. Know the difference. When the harness goes on, it's time to work. work hard. Others are depending on you. Number 2, focus in and use all of your senses. Learn to tell the difference between a harmless thunderstorm and a true emergency. Roselle was afraid of thunder, but she worked tirelessly without fear on 9/11. The last part of number 2, don't let your sight get in the way of your vision. Number 3, sometimes the way is hard, but if you work together, someone will pass along a water bottle just when you need it. Number 4, Roselle's favorite, always kiss firefighters. Number 5, ignore distractions. There's more to life than playing fetch or chasing tennis balls. Number 6, listen carefully to those who are wiser and more experienced than you. They'll help you find the way. Number 7, don't stop until work is over. Sometimes being a hero is just doing your job. Number 8, the dust cloud won't last forever. Keep going and look for the way out. It will come. Number 9, shake off the dust and move on. Remember the first guide dog command, forward. And number 10, when work is over, play hard with your friends and don't forget to share your favorite Boda-Bone. Everyone, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure to be here. I hope this has been helpful. Hope to see you back at the book table, but most of all, just work together and help the good guys win. Thanks very much.